In 1 Peter chapter number 1, we're in a series on focuses for suffering believers. Those of you that were at camp last week, which was over half the church, I did not teach or preach on the subject. I didn't want you to miss out on the series that we have for the summer. But we're in 1 Peter chapter 1. We're dealing with Peter, an apostle of Christ. We're dealing with him about 30 years, 35 years after Christ is risen from the dead and is off the scene, is ascended into heaven. And Peter is writing now to a group of people in northern Turkey, represented by Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. They are believers, but they are scattered. They are foreigners. They are persecuted believers. They are people that are dealing with suffering. And Peter writes to them, and he writes to them and he points them to their salvation, and he gives them all kinds of focuses throughout the book of 1 Peter and directs their attention to some things that they need to turn their eyes off these things, and they need to turn their eyes on these things. The background of 1 Peter, as we talked about a few weeks ago, imagine these scattered foreigners receiving a letter, and I don't know how it circulated, but it must have gotten around to a number of different regions as this letter of 1 Peter reached them. And they must have saw it was from Peter and thought, wow, I wonder what Peter has to say to us in these living conditions. You can imagine maybe them being discouraged. You can imagine them being very uncertain. You can imagine them maybe even doubting the goodness of God with the change that has taken place in their life in such a short amount of time. Little did Peter know that at this time, 30 years later, he would be used to strengthen the brethren.